They say the truth will set you free, but what they don't tell you is what happens after that. What do you do when the truth is a burden, a weight that threatens to crush you, to isolate you from the rest of the world, a world blissfully unaware of the enormity of what's out there staring back at us? I often wonder if I'd made a different choice, back in grad school, taken a different path, would things be different? But no, it wouldn't matter. Eventually someone would have seen it, and that someone would be standing here just like I am. It's funny, isn't it? Humanity spends billions searching for a hint of microbial life on Mars, a fleeting whiff of methane in some distant atmosphere, and we completely miss the colossal, undeniable evidence of something far more significant, something that's been there all along. Or maybe we weren't ready. Maybe collectively as a species, we needed to reach a certain point, develop the right tools, before we could even begin to perceive the scale of what we're dealing with. The James Webb Space Telescope, they called it the telescope that ate astronomy. And it did, in a way. It devoured our old assumptions, our neat little boxes of understanding, and replaced them with something far grander, far more terrifying. It wasn't just the images, breathtaking as they were. It was the data, the cold, hard numbers that reconfigured reality as I knew it. We were no longer looking for faint biosignatures. We were staring into the face of a technological marvel so advanced, so far beyond our comprehension, that it defied any easy categorization, at least by human standards. It forced us to reevaluate not only our place in the universe, but also our definition of civilization itself. Before all this happened, my biggest concern was tenure and whether or not my grant proposals would be approved. My colleagues often called my work Wyatt's Folly. They thought the search for extraterrestrial intelligence was a waste of time. My relationship with the esteemed Dr. Fisher, the director of Space Telescope Science Institute, was complicated. I knew he thought I was wasting valuable telescope time. I often wonder what he thinks now. It's 2024. You'd think with the world glued to their AR feeds, showcasing every minor celebrity hiccup and political gaffe, there'd be more interest in the final frontier. But no. Space exploration is considered a luxury, a distraction from the real problems. Climate change protests clog the streets, the economy is a roller coaster of inflation and recession, and cyber attacks are a daily occurrence. People are too busy looking down, scrolling through their feeds to look up at the stars. They're too busy fighting among themselves to be bothered with what lies beyond. My days at STSCI were a blur of data streams, grant proposals, and the occasional condescending email from colleagues who thought SETI was a waste of resources. Don't get me wrong, the Institute is a marvel of modern science. Located in Baltimore, it's a complex of gleaming glass and steel, housing some of the brightest minds in astrophysics. Inside, server rooms hummed with the power of 1,000 suns, the centerpiece of which was the control hub for the Webb telescope. Banks of monitors displayed real-time data from the telescope, a flow of light and numbers that held the secrets of the universe. My office, on the other hand, was less impressive. A cramped space filled with stacks of research papers, star charts, and empty coffee cups. It was organized chaos, but it was mine. It was where I felt most at home. But even amidst the relative normalcy of my work, there was an undercurrent of anticipation. K2-18b, a super-Earth 124 light-years away in the constellation Leo, a prime candidate for the search for biosignatures, those telltale signs of life that could rewrite the textbooks. Its atmosphere contained water vapor. This was what made it a prime candidate. Most of my colleagues were more interested in studying brown dwarfs and mapping the distribution of dark matter. Important work, no doubt, but it lacked the spark, the sheer existential thrill of searching for life beyond Earth. Then came the day. I remember it with a clarity that borders on painful. It was a Tuesday, I believe. I was reviewing data from the latest Webb observation run, specifically focusing on K2-18b. Ben, a fresh-faced postdoc, barely out of grad school, pointed out the anomaly. "Dr. Wyatt, "You might want to take a look at this," he'd said. He was pointing at a section of the screen. I remember taking off my glasses and cleaning them with the bottom of my shirt. A nervous habit. At first, I dismissed it. A glitch, perhaps. An artifact of the imaging process. But my gut, honed by years spent staring into the abyss, told me otherwise. There, orbiting K2-18b, was a distinct, geometric pattern. A network of interconnected nodes, like a cosmic spiderweb. It was unlike anything I had ever seen. The way it interacted with the exoplanet's light, the sharp angles, the sheer scale of it, it was undeniably artificial. It wasn't a solid, contiguous structure. It was more like a lattice, a framework of interconnected points, forming a complex, three-dimensional web around the planet. The nodes themselves were massive, each one likely larger than any asteroid in our solar system. The way they reflected the light from the distant star, it was almost like they were designed to do that, to be seen. My first reaction was disbelief, followed by a surge of adrenaline that made my heart pound against my ribs. I checked, double-checked, and triple-checked the data. I ran simulations, ruled out errors, and even considered the possibility of a prank, a sophisticated hack of Webb's systems. But the evidence was irrefutable. This was no error. This was real. The structure was vast, dwarfing any known natural object. Its geometric precision was undeniable, clashing with the chaotic beauty of the cosmos. The structure was reflecting light in a way that suggested a metallic composition, but unlike any metal we knew. It didn't just reflect, it seemed to absorb and re-emit light, creating a distinct spectral signature. I remember calling my mentor, Dr. Evans, a pioneer in SETI, now retired and living somewhere in the Arizona desert. "Arthur," I said, my voice trembling slightly. "I think we found something." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "Daniel," he finally said, "be careful. Be very, very careful." He went on to tell me about Project Blue Book and how any evidence of extraterrestrial life was quickly classified and hidden from the public. In the following days, I drafted a preliminary report, a dry, academic summary of the findings, but laced with the profound implications of the discovery. I emphasized the need for global collaboration, for transparency. I was naive enough to believe that the world deserved to know, that science should be open and accessible to all. I scheduled a meeting with Dr. Fisher, the STSCI director, to present my findings. I never made it to that meeting. It was early morning when they came. Not with a bang, but with the quiet, unsettling efficiency of professionals. I was in the operations center reviewing the latest data from the VLT when a team of agents dressed in black tactical gear, their faces obscured by visors, stormed in. They carried weapons, not the bulky rifles you see in action movies, but sleek, compact carbines, clearly designed for close-quarters combat. They quickly secured the room, their eyes scanning every corner, every monitor, every face. Data related to K2-18b was classified at the highest level. Access to the Webb telescope was restricted. My team was placed under surveillance. My apartment was searched, my belongings scrutinized, my life dissected. I was being watched, followed, my every move analyzed. My phone calls were tapped and my emails were monitored. And then came the summons. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled up outside my apartment. Two men, one in a nondescript suit, the other in a military uniform, escorted me to an undisclosed location. A building that didn't appear on any map. An NSA black site, most likely. That was the first time I met Mr. Hayes and Miss Sterling. The ride to the facility was a blur of muted city sounds and the smooth sound of the SUV's engine. The driver, a man whose face seemed permanently fixed in a neutral expression, navigated the streets with practiced ease. The man next to me, dressed in an ill-fitting suit that strained against his broad shoulders, stared straight ahead, saying nothing. His silence was more intimidating than any interrogation. They had taken my phone, of course. The windows were tinted, and as we drove, the already dim light of dusk faded into complete darkness, making it impossible to discern anything of our surroundings. The building itself was unremarkable. A nondescript block of concrete and tinted glass that blended seamlessly into the urban sprawl. It could have been an office building, a data center, or any number of anonymous facilities that dot the modern landscape. There were no markings, no signs, nothing to indicate its purpose, but the heavy steel door, the security cameras that swiveled silently to track our movements, and the two armed guards who flanked the entrance told a different story. This was no ordinary building. The interior was just as nondescript as the exterior. White walls, fluorescent lights, and the smell of antiseptic cleaner. We walked down a long, featureless corridor, our footsteps echoing in the silence. The man in the suit led the way. I was taken to a small windowless room furnished only with a steel table and 2 chairs. The walls were bare, the air conditioning set to an uncomfortable chill. It was a room designed for one purpose: interrogation. Mr. Hayes and Miss Sterling were already inside. They didn't introduce themselves, of course. They didn't need to. Their names were etched in my memory from the countless hours I'd spent researching the Special Collections Service, digging through redacted documents and obscure online forums. Hayes was the field agent, the muscle, a man of average height but built like a brick wall, with close-cropped hair and eyes that seemed to absorb everything without revealing anything in return. Sterling was the brains, the analyst, taller than Hayes with sharp features and a gaze that could cut through steel. She was missing the little finger on her left hand. The story was that she lost it during an operation in the Middle East. "Dr. Wyatt," Hayes began, "we know what you saw. It's a matter of national security," Sterling added. "Disclosure of this information would have undesirable consequences." They wanted me to sign a non-disclosure agreement, a document thicker than my doctoral thesis, filled with legalese that essentially forbade me from ever speaking about the megastructure. They explained in their chillingly detached way that the public wasn't ready for such a discovery, that it would cause mass panic, societal collapse. They spoke of potential threats, of unknown variables, their words painting a picture of a world teetering on the brink of chaos. "Imagine," Sterling said, leaning forward, her eyes fixed on mine, "the religious implications alone, the upheaval, the societal fragmentation, or the geopolitical ramifications, the race to exploit, to weaponize such a discovery. The world is not prepared." It was evident that they had prepared for this moment. It was also evident that they had done this before. They confiscated my report, my notes, and any copies of the data I had stored on my personal devices. They made it clear that any attempt to go public would result in severe consequences. Not just for my career, but for my freedom. They knew about my contact with Dr. Evans. They knew about my research into SETI. They knew about the K2-18b data. They knew everything. It was clear that they had been watching me for a while. "We're not the bad guys here, Dr. Wyatt," Hayes said. "We're trying to protect humanity." He almost sounded like he believed it. I signed the document, the pen feeling heavy in my hand. What choice did I have? As I scrawled my signature across the bottom of the last page, I felt a part of me wither and die. My scientific integrity, my belief in the pursuit of truth, all crushed under the weight of their imposed secrecy. The moment I stepped outside that building, I knew my life had irrevocably changed. Despite the threats, the fear, a part of me, that stubborn, inquisitive part that had led me to this point, refused to let go. I had to know more. I had to understand the reason behind the cover-up. I started digging, cautiously at first, using my knowledge of the agency's structure and operations, gleaned from my research. I knew they were a black-budget operation, funded through shell corporations and hidden accounts. I used the dark web, encrypted forums, and black-market information brokers, searching for any mention of the SCS, K2-18b, or anything related to unusual signals or phenomena in that region of space. It was a dangerous game, and I knew that one wrong move could expose me. I reached out to a few trusted colleagues using coded language, sharing fragments of information, hoping for insights or assistance. Most dismissed me, fearing the repercussions of getting involved. One evening, while scouring a dark web forum known for its trove of leaked government documents, I came across a cryptic message referencing Project Threshold and a series of coordinates pointing to the Leo constellation. The message was signed with the initial S. After weeks of careful communication, using layers of encryption and misdirection, I managed to establish contact with S. He claimed to be a former NSA analyst, involved in a project related to the SCS's activities. He was reluctant, paranoid, and understandably so, but eventually he agreed to meet. Silas, as he called himself, lived off-grid, in a remote, fortified compound somewhere in the Nevada desert. The drive there was long and arduous, the landscape desolate and unforgiving. His residence was the embodiment of his paranoia, a concrete bunker surrounded by an array of surveillance cameras, motion detectors, and a perimeter fence topped with unforgiving razor wire. The cameras, I noticed, were an odd mix of cutting-edge, high-definition models and older analog ones, as if he didn't fully trust either technology on its own. Silas was a wiry man, his eyes darting nervously around the room, constantly scanning his surroundings. It was clear he hadn't had a decent night's sleep in a long time. He had clearly been through something traumatic. Every creak of the house, every gust of wind that rattled the windows made him jump. He kept glancing at the monitors displaying the feeds from his numerous security cameras, his gaze lingering on each one for a few seconds too long. "They're watching," he said, his voice low and strained. "They're always watching." He told me everything, or at least everything he claimed to know, about the unusual signals emanating from the K2-18b region, detected long before the launch of the Webb telescope, through highly classified advanced signal intelligence programs that he had once been a part of, about the Megastructure, far more complex and extensive than what the initial, heavily redacted images released to a select few within the agency had revealed, about the SCS's belief that it was not a relic, but an active, possibly sentient device. He insisted that his former colleagues believed it had some purpose, some function that they were struggling to understand. He didn't seem to believe in the possibility of it being sentient. "They think it's connected to our past, to ancient civilizations, to the myths and legends we've dismissed as folklore," Silas said, his gaze drifting towards a wall covered with a chaotic collage of newspaper clippings, printouts of ancient texts, and photographs of archaeological sites, all held in place with pushpins and yellowing tape. The arrangement seemed random at first, but as I looked closer, I could discern a pattern, a desperate attempt to connect seemingly disparate events and phenomena. They being the operative word. He was definitely not one of them anymore. He spoke of a possible reactivation, a response to human activity, perhaps even triggered by our increasingly powerful telescopes, our probing into the universe's secrets. As if we had inadvertently sent out a signal of our own, without realizing the implications. He then explained what he believed was the true purpose of the SCS. Not just to contain information, but to study the device, to understand its capabilities, and, if possible, to find a way to counter it, or at least to control the narrative around it. They feared its power, its potential for disruption, its very existence. They were operating under the assumption that any widespread knowledge of the megastructure would lead to global chaos, a complete breakdown of social order. He kept repeating the phrase, "They are not prepared." "They're not just trying to protect us from the unknown," Silas said. "They're trying to protect us from ourselves." He laughed, a short, sharp bark of a laugh that was devoid of any humor. The meeting left me shaken, disturbed, and more determined than ever to expose the truth. I had glimpsed the abyss, and it was staring back at me, not through any tangible artifact or mysterious energy, but through the undeniable existence of a structure light years away and the terrified conviction of a man who knew too much. I needed to find a way to bring all this to light, to make people see what I had seen, to understand what Silas understood. But how could I, one man against a vast, powerful and secretive organization, possibly make a difference? They had the resources, the technology, and the will to suppress the truth. And I had nothing but a handful of data and the word of a paranoid ex-analyst. Silas's revelations had lit a fire in me, a dangerous mix of fear and determination. I knew the risks, the potential consequences of going against the SES, but the thought of remaining silent, of letting them bury the truth, was unbearable. I couldn't just stand by and watch as they manipulated the world's perception of reality. But I also knew that a direct public leak would be futile, easily dismissed as a conspiracy theory, and would likely result in my immediate silencing. Instead, I opted for a more calculated approach, a controlled detonation rather than a reckless explosion. I decided to share my findings with a select group of individuals, scientists, and policymakers with the influence and the credibility to force a reassessment of the situation from within. People who were not part of the SCS, but still held positions of power. I meticulously prepared a presentation, a condensed version of everything I knew. The Webb images, my analysis, Silas's information, all stripped of any sensationalism, presented with the hard logic of scientific observation. I included data on the unusual signals, the megastructure's geometry, and its potential implications, carefully avoiding any mention of ancient aliens or speculative theories. It was a presentation designed to shock, to inform, but most importantly, to persuade. I contacted each individual personally, using encrypted channels, emphasizing the urgency and the sensitivity of the information. I managed to secure a meeting with 5 individuals. The meeting was set for a nondescript hotel conference room in downtown Baltimore, a location chosen for its anonymity, its easy access, and its proximity to a major transportation hub. The room was bland, generic, furnished with the standard issue table, uncomfortable chairs, and a projector screen. I began my presentation, my voice echoing slightly in the room. The attendees, a mix of tenured professors, a former NASA administrator, and a couple of high-ranking officials from the Department of Defense, listened intently, their initial skepticism slowly giving way to awe and apprehension. The images of the megastructure, displayed in stark detail on the projector screen, spoke for themselves. The data, meticulously organized and analyzed, was undeniable. But as I moved on to Silas's information, outlining the SCS's activities and their belief in the megastructure's potential threat, I noticed a shift in the room. A few furtive glances were exchanged. A phone was discreetly checked. The former NASA administrator, a woman I had long admired, wouldn't meet my eye. I should have stopped then. I should have trusted my instincts. But I pressed on, driven by a naive belief that the truth would prevail. Then it all came crashing down. The door burst open and a team of SCS agents flooded the room. They were swift, efficient, and utterly ruthless. They confiscated laptops, phones, and any other devices present. They didn't need to speak. Their actions spoke volumes. Mr. Hayes was among them, surveying the scene. The attendees, my carefully chosen champions of truth, were detained, questioned, and I can only assume, sworn to secrecy under the threat of severe penalties, likely through the invocation of national security laws and executive orders I hadn't even known existed. They were prominent figures, but not powerful enough to fight the SCS. I was apprehended, my presentation seized, my meticulously gathered evidence reduced to nothing more than a collection of confiscated files. The raid was swift, precise, and utterly demoralizing. It was clear they had known about the meeting all along. They had let me play out my little charade, only to crush it at the last possible moment. It was a demonstration of power, a reminder of their reach. Mr. Hayes approached me. "You really thought you could do this, Dr. Wyatt? You signed an agreement. You knew the consequences." I was taken back to the black site. Not to the interrogation room this time, but to a small, sparsely furnished office. They didn't need to interrogate me. They already knew everything. Instead, they wanted to make sure I understood the gravity of my situation. I was informed that I was being charged with violating the Espionage Act, a federal offense that carried a lengthy prison sentence. The evidence against me was overwhelming. The presentation, the emails, the meeting itself, all meticulously documented by their surveillance. Miss Sterling explained, in her chillingly calm way, that my actions had jeopardized national security, that I had endangered the lives of countless individuals. She spoke of the potential for global panic, of the fragility of the social order, of the need for control in the face of the unknown. "We're not the bad guys, Dr. Wyatt," she said, echoing Hayes's words from our first encounter. "We're trying to prevent chaos, to protect humanity from a threat it doesn't even know exists." They offered me a deal, a way out. If I cooperated fully, if I agreed to remain silent, to never again speak of the megastructure, they would drop the charges. I would be allowed to return to my life, under the condition of constant surveillance, of course. They presented it as an act of leniency, a chance to redeem myself, but I knew it was just another form of imprisonment. My passport was confiscated. They made it clear that they would be watching my every move, listening to every conversation, monitoring every email. I had no choice. I agreed. What else could I do? Fight them and spend the rest of my life in a federal prison? Leak the information anonymously and risk being silenced permanently? They had me cornered. They had won. I was allowed to return to my work at the Institute, but I was a ghost, a pariah. My colleagues avoided me, their whispers and sidelong glances a constant reminder of my disgrace. My career was effectively over. I was a scientist who had seen too much, a man burdened with a truth he could never share. The SES continued their investigation of the megastructure in absolute secrecy, their activities shrouded in a veil of classified projects and black budgets. What they were doing, what they had learned, remained a mystery to me and to the world. Now I spend my nights staring up at the sky, at the distant stars, knowing that out there, orbiting a planet 124 light-years away, a colossal structure of unknown origin and purpose silently remains. And I am left with nothing but the silence, the weight of the truth, and the chilling certainty that the world is not as it seems. The irony of it all was that I had set out to find the truth, to enlighten humanity, and in the end, I was the one left in the dark, trapped in a cage of my own making. They didn't need to lock me up. They had something far more effective, the knowledge that I was powerless, that any attempt to reveal the truth would be met with swift and brutal suppression. They had broken me, not with force, but with the chilling efficiency of a system designed to protect its secrets at all costs. And I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that they would do it again, to anyone who dared to question the official narrative. The truth was out there, but it was buried under layers of secrecy, guarded by an invisible enemy that held all the cards. And all I could do was watch and wait and wonder if the day would ever come when the world would finally be ready to see what I had seen.